Hi, good afternoon, everybody. We've got a few technical problems at this end with the Teams invite, so we're just going to hang on for a couple of minutes to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to dial in. So if you can just bear with us for a couple of minutes, and then we'll start the meeting. Right. Thanks very much.
Hi, Mark.
Yeah, Chair, there's two meetings. I don't know whether you know in my diary, and I've been in the other one with others waiting to be let into the lobby. So I don't know whether that's the issue.
Yeah, we think that is the issue, Mark. That's what we're trying to resolve at the moment. Simon is looking to resolve that issue. So that's why we've got some technical. That was the technical problem. We're not quite sure how it's happened, but we just need to make sure everybody's in the same meeting. So that's what we're just doing, if that's okay with everybody.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Apologies to those who've just joined the meeting. As you've probably seen, we do have two meeting invites, and so we're just waiting for others who were in the other meeting to make sure that they're in this one.
Okay.
Okay, I think we have ignition. I think having counselled Simon with the technical glitch, we seem to be okay. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending and welcome to Schools Forum. Simon, if we could start in the agenda item 1 in terms of apologies, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And apologies to everybody for that glitch there. So we received apologies from Andrew Skelding, Emily Vero, from Craig Hodgson. I thought I'd received apologies from Paul Spreadbury as well, but I thought I saw Paul in the list. Is that correct, Paul? Are you there? I'll take that as a no, so apologies from Paul as well.
Simon, Paul was on the other call, so he should be joining us, I'm guessing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Simon, for that. Have we got any declarations of interest for item 2, please?
Philip with his hand up.
Oh, Philip?
Sorry, no, it's not a declaration. I've just been speaking with Sadie Jones, who sends her apologies. She can't attend. She's not very well today.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Thank you, Philip. Declarations of interest, anybody? Okay, thank you. If we can join item 3 and 4 together, I think people know the way that I like to do it by now. So we've got the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January and the matters arising. Has anybody got any issues, first of all, around the accuracy of the minutes? Fabulous. And has anybody got any matters arising from the minutes? Steve?
Yeah, I mean, just one very briefly, and you'll be pleased to know it is only one. I think it's on page 6. I agreed to go back to the DFE, the ESFA about the 0.5% transfer, which I did, and that was minuted, and there was a post meeting note that Simon put in as well. But just to remind colleagues that we did get response from Christina Choi, or whatever her name is, I can't quite remember, from the ESFA in the middle of February, and Simon did actually circulate that separately, so it's not in a minute or as a post-meeting note, but it was circulated separately to all members of Forum on the 19th of February, if you want to refresh your memory with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve, and thank you for taking the time to write that letter on behalf of Schools Forum. Okay, so everybody's happy with the minutes? If we can then move on to item 5, please, which is decisions taken by the chairman under delegated powers. I didn't make any decisions, Simon? Great. Item 6 is the resignation of the chair following the July meeting. We've got the elections in July. I would just like to inform everybody that I will be stepping down next year. I am in the process of digging my tunnel for September. I'm currently in no man's land, but I expect to pop my head up behind the barbed wire in September. So I am stepping down. If anybody who is thinking around taking on the role wants to know any more about it, then you're most welcome to give me a ring. I'm sure Steve Barr would offer that as well. Steve Barr knows far more than me, but if you are considering taking on the post and you want to know what it actually consists of, then please, if you contact Tim, Tim, if you could pass on my number. I'd rather speak to people than email. I'm much more efficient at that. You're most welcome to give me a ring. But I thought I'd give people the heads up, them time to think around and consider whether they want to throw their cap into the ring. Thank you for that. Item 7, notices of concern and licence deficit agreements. Alison, I think that one's yours.
Sorry, I was muted and not on view. Yeah, so this is the report that Entrust colleagues prepare for us. For this one, there's absolutely nothing to report. There's no changes since the last meeting, so that's basically just giving that information to the forum. I think, haven't we, Tim, had a conversation about going forward that we'll bring this report on an exception basis rather than take the time to prepare a report that doesn't actually report anything?
Thanks, Alison. Yes, I think the request is to keep the item as an agenda item, but where there's nothing to report, we would then just provide a verbal report to say there is nothing to report, rather than bring in a written report to say there's nothing to report. I think our view is that it needs to be there to remind everybody that it is an agenda item. However, when there's nothing to report, we as I say, we just provide a verbal update rather than a written update, if that's okay with members of Forum.
That seems very sensible to me. Anybody in disagreement? If you'd like to show your hands. Great. Yeah, that's fine then, Tim. Thank you. Thank you, Alison. Sorry. Item 8, which is the school's budget update. I think that is you, Luke.
It is, thank you, Chair. So this is the annual schools budget update report for 24-25. The report confirms the budget set for schools and rates for early years providers. I'll just briefly go through the report, starting at the central provisions. So the Schools Forum considered the indicative level of planned central expenditure for 24-25 at its November meeting. Included within the central schools expenditure is funding for growth, which is allocated to the local authority on a formula basis. The allocation for 24-25 is 3.3 million. This is used to fund growth above the census in the national funding formula. The remaining funding is held centrally, which is 2.6 million. This is to meet commitments under the infant class size and exceptional growth policies. Any underspend will be transferred to the DSG deficit as per the deficit management plan. There's been a slight increase to the levy for the education functions from what was reported at the November meeting due to a change in the number on roll at maintained schools. The final levy for 24-25 has been set at £57.93 per pupil. Moving on to individual schools budgets, just starting at the bottom of page 22. So the formula budgets are based on the national funding formula. The national funding formula includes a minimum per pupil funding level. For 24-25, the minimum funding levels per pupil are £4,610 for primary, £5,771 for Key Stage 3, and £6,331 for Key Stage 4. The budget includes a minimum funding guarantee of plus 0.5% per pupil from the 23-24 baseline, and the individual schools budgets can be seen in Appendix 1. Within the national funding formula, the core funding factors have been increased by 1.4%, and free school meals funding rates increased by 1.6%. To ensure the national funding formula is affordable within the schools block DSG allocation, gains have been capped at 1.25%. As mentioned at the previous meeting, the request to transfer 0.5% of schools block DSG funding to the high needs block has been approved by the Secretary of State, and this equates to 3.2 million being transferred. Moving on to the early years funding section now. So the government's 2023 spring budget announced the extension of 30 hours funded childcare offer. Details of the rollout can be seen in paragraph 18. The council consulted with early years providers on the additional entitlements in November-December 2023, with a proposed funding formula presented to Schools Forum in January 2024. A workshop was also held in January 24 with the early years reference group to discuss the rationale behind the funding formula, rates and budget. The discussions had during the workshop and subsequent response from the early years reference group were considered alongside the final proposals. So for 2024, Staffordshire County Council has been awarded £5.47 per hour for 3 and 4 year olds, £7.66 per hour for 2 year olds, and £10.40 per hour for under 2 year olds. The Disability Access Fund has increased by £82 to £910 per eligible child per hour. The early years pupil premium has increased by 6p to 68p per eligible child per hour. And the government has extended eligibility for the Disability Access Fund and early years pupil premium to all children accessing the entitlements for 24-25. So the early years funding base rates have been set, and they are for 3 and 4 year olds, £5.08 per child per hour. For 2 year olds, £7.56 per child per hour. And for under 2 year olds, £9.48 per child per hour. For 3 and 4 year olds, deprivation rates have been maintained at the same amount as in 23-24. So that's 20p being the lower rate and 30p being the upper rate. No additional funding supplements, including deprivation, have been used for the 2 year olds and under 2 year old rates. A contingency fund of 0.7 million has been set up to manage fluctuations. This is equivalent to 0.76% of the early years DSG block, which is lower than the 1% threshold advised by the workshop. Any unspent contingency will only be distributed if affordable. And the Special Educational Needs Inclusion Fund for 24-25 has been set at 2 million. 1.6 million to be funded by the early years block and 0.4 million by the high needs block. And just moving on to the high needs section now, the government has confirmed Staffordshire's 24-25 high needs block allocation to be circa 132.4 million. This is a net increase of 5.4 million compared to 23-24. As a result of the 0.5% funding switch, the total 24-25 high needs budget is circa 135.6 million. It is Staffordshire's intention to pass the budget increase on in full next year for the provision of SEND support. And finally, for 24-25, special school budgets shown in Appendix 2 will be set based on a minimum funding guarantee of 0% with no capping of schools' gains. And that's what I was proposing to say on high needs. I think the following report will go into a bit more detail. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Luke. Have we any questions from the floor?
Yeah, my hand's up again, Richard.
No problem, Steve. Yeah, I can see your hands up. So you go first, Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just one question. You might want to pass this on to Anthony in the next item, but the school's budget update report at the top of page 26 has got a bullet point about the EBT, the education banding tool, where it says it refers to the intention of reinstating the EBT from autumn 2024. And I was going to ask a question about whether there was really enough time for that until I read the paper on the next item, which says on page 46, it won't be before April 2025. So either now or under the next item, could we have some clarity about that, please?
Okay, Steve, I think if we leave it to the actual high needs block report to find that clarity, it might be better.
I can answer it now.
Yeah.
Are you there, Anthony?
I am here.
No, let's wait till we do the EBD on the high needs block, and then we can pull it all together, please.
Okay, no worries.
Okay.
I'm perfectly happy with that. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Philip, I think your hand's up.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got just 2 points. One on the first one on the, we had the meeting with the early years reference group, as we traditionally do in January. But I have to say that we were all rather disappointed with the outcome of the basic rate, because there was 4 pence out of the 26 pence that were not channeled through, and the problem is that it results in about a 4.5% increase, whereas the nurseries in the all nurseries, but the PVI sector have been facing increases of around 10%, mainly due to the government wage legislation. Now, we know that this isn't the fault of the local authority, but the problem is that it widens the gap between, we were already underfunded quite seriously, and that we're underfunded even more now. And whilst for nurseries in more affluent areas where parents are willing to pay for other items which are legitimately allowed in the guidance, in deprived areas this is just not possible. So it is going to, we really do feel that it is going to result in more nursery closures, especially in deprived areas. So that was the first point. But we are, I have to say, we do work very closely with Anthony on these meetings, and we are very grateful for what Staffordshire County Council do, given this intolerable situation that we get from the government. The second point is I did allude to it in the last meeting, and that is that with this increased entitlement, certainly in 2 years' time, there will be the government will be paying will be 80% of PVI's business will be paid for by the government. And the problem arises in the regulation, because it is entirely possible for somebody to lose entitlement to their funding if they are judged inadequate, and that does happen, and it happens fairly frequently. Now, this, I think, needs, we put forward the way that Lancashire County Council do it, which is not an immediate withdrawal of funds. And to be fair, Staffordshire County Council isn't an immediate withdrawal of funds, but it does result in funding not being available for the children who are coming up to the age thresholds in the nursery. And this, when 80% of the business of the PVI is funded, this is going to make an enormous difference and will result in immediate failures of nurseries. And I think this really does need addressing, and we are asking formally for a early years reference group meeting on that. I just wanted to flag those points up. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Anthony or Will, do you want to make any comments around what Philip has just said?
Hi, thanks for that, Philip. Yeah, and we appreciate your concerns about the lack of increase generally from government. We've, as you know, we've worked very closely with you over the past number of years, and we know your priority, or the priority of the early years reference group, is to get that funding into the base rate as much as possible. And you know, over the last 4 or 5 years, pretty much every penny increase we've had has gone into the base rate. This year we've seen an escalation, in the last 2 or 3 years really, an escalation of the SENIF costs, which was getting to a point where that had to be addressed. So we had to take some funding out of the increase we got from central government in order to put that budget correct and more on an even footing. However, in doing that, we still managed to get 22p of the 26p into the base rate, but that was as far as we could go.
Understood. And as I say, we know it's not your fault, and we understand the reasons. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Steve, I think your hand's up. Are you on mute, Steve? Or I think you're still on mute.
Should be okay now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we've got you now.
Yeah. It's in relation to Appendix 1. 2 questions and an observation, really. There's a column saying 2024-25 if no funding switch. Now, some of the figures in that column are the same as 2024-25, which implies that those schools have had no loss of income due to the switch. Is that my correct interpretation? And why is that? That's one question. The second question is, in the columns at the end, the 2023 for 2024-25 budget per pupil MFG calculation, how could an individual school actually get back to those figures that are quoted? That's the second question. And the third one is almost like an observation. Seeing that the mainstream school additional grant has now been incorporated, the budget doesn't seem as generous as you think in the first look at it, if you know what I mean. That's the 3 points I've got.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Luke or Will, do you want to pick up those questions, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to come up in on that one. The first question about the appendix, some schools won't have had any kind of reduction because of the funding switch. So how the funding switch does, it just takes 3.2 million out of the overall allocation to schools, and then you put that through the budget. Now, only if your school was due to rise above the cap of the 1.25%, would you have had a funding reduction in order to get you down to the 1.25%. So if you were never going to get up to that 1.25% gain anyway, you were never going to be capped. So that's the first one. The MFG question is quite technical, but on the SLM, there's a technical guidance which itemises school by school exactly how that is worked out. So you should all have that information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Will. Steve, are you happy with that explanation?
Yes, thanks.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Will. Any other questions from the floor? Okay, I've got just a couple of questions I'd just like to ask Luke. The growth fund, I think you said that it sits at 3.8 million. Has that stayed stable? Has it gone up? Has it gone down? Where does that figure sit historically, please?
I think in the previous year, I think the growth fund, it was 4.1 million. So it's gone down from 23-24. The amount retained centrally, it's fairly consistent with the previous year.
And is that due to national conditions, or is it a decision that Staffordshire have made locally?
The growth fund allocation is formula driven. So it depends on your growth in your census from one year to the next on what's called a local super output area. So it's very difficult to predict, and that can fluctuate year on year. Hence why it's kept aside from the rest of school funding, and we don't put it into the base.
Brilliant, thank you. That's great.
Am I not, sorry, Richard, but am I not right in thinking, Will, it's in most years it's underspent and the underspend goes back into DSG?
Yes, most year it is underspent and it goes to DSG, and we have that as part of the deficit management plan. But the overall quantum of the growth funds can vary quite considerably. So, like last year, it's 4 million. This year, it's 3.3, and there's no way of really predicting that.
Okay, thank you, Will. My other question, just looking at the special school funding and the mainstream funding, I see that in item 10 of the individual schools' budgets, that the MFG for mainstream is 0.5, and then we look at the high needs block, and the minimum funding guarantee for specials is 0%. I just wondered what explanation there is around that, please.
Somebody's still coming. Do you want me to come in, or is it you answer that, Tim?
I can pick it up in terms of there's a requirement based in the operational guidance around the MFG for special schools and the high needs block funding. As we've always reported, that there's a significant pressure on the High Needs block. We have to do everything we can to manage the overspend in the High Needs block, and so therefore the operational guidance allows us to set the 0% for the special schools.
Thanks, Tim. What is that range that you have choice between then? What is the range you can set the minimum funded guarantee?
I am going to have to ask Ant to remind me, or Sarah to remind me, in terms of the operational guidance.
For high needs block, it was, well, for special schools, it was between 0 and 0.5%.
Okay, thank you.
But
thank you. And yeah, just bear with me a second, Steve, and I'll let you come in. Just the last one, really, is just not really a question, but a comment around our PRUs. At the moment, as Tim pointed out in the education reference group, that all of our PRUs are absolutely rammed. There are no places. So even the places, the dual role places now are having to be terminated and turned into single role places. There will be a financial implication for our PRUs. I just want to put that in the minutes, so at some point we've got a reference point to come back, that there will be an impact on our PRU budgets, of which aren't great anyway. But like I say, I want to drop that down as a reference point that can be brought back up at a later point. Steve?
Yes, thank you, Richard. I was going to bring this up under the next item, but you've given me the perfect lead in, so I'll do it now. But I was going to make exactly the same point, and it is a comment, and it's clearly not aimed at local authority at all. But there have been recently published figures that show that 2 out of 3 special schoolers are either at or in most cases above capacity, and there is certainly disquiet in Staffordshire, and I'm sure nationally, about the very point that you just made, Richard, about the fact that the PRUs are rammed and that mainstream schools can't access the support that they would like to have from PRUs or short stay schools or whatever we call them, and don't have because of their own budget problems, don't have the resources to deal with those youngsters within the mainstream setting. So, I mean, I just wanted to restate that and really support what Richard's just said in terms of both special schools and PRUs, and I have put in the chat, rather than read it all out, but I'll put in the chat a statement that's actually come from Askell just this morning about and again, it's aimed not at the local authority, but it finishes with the requiring much greater sense of urgency from the government. So that's it. It's just another one of my little bit of thumping appearances that make me feel better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, any other questions for Luke around the school's budget update? Thank you very much, Luke. Thank you very much, Will, and Anthony, for your contributions, and indeed Tim. Moving on to item 9, which is the high needs block. I think that one's for you, Sarah.
Yeah. Hi all, this is the regular report outlining the latest position of the high needs block as per the request of Schools Forum, given the ongoing pressures in this area. As usual, I won't go through the paper in full, as I presume forum members have had ample opportunity to read the paper. But to summarise, the paper outlines that the forecast overspend in the high needs block at this time for 2023-2024 is £21 million, £1 million higher than the forecast previously reported. As before, demand continues to exceed capacity, with now around 7,700 EHCPs and increasing at typically 500 per annum. Demand is up roughly 55% from just 5 years ago. This is impacting across all areas, as we've just discussed, but especially the independent sector, with numbers now around 650, over 200 more than what they were just 3 years ago. And this is by some way the largest budget pressure in the high needs block. Importantly, the paper also outlines a significant decline in our DSG reserve, which at the start of the year was already in deficit by 14.2 million. This will increase to over 30 million by the end of the year, based on the current forecast overspend. In November 2022, we brought forward a proposed deficit management plan to mitigate as far as possible the existing overspend. Part of that plan included a 0.5% funding switch from the schools block. The transfer for 2024-2025 was not supported by the School Forum. However, it was supported by the Secretary of State, and therefore, as we've already mentioned, about 3.2 million will be added to the high needs block budget. The paper goes on to outline the high needs block budget for 2024-2025. As we've already said, the government allocated just over 132 million for Staffage's high needs block. And once we add the 3.2 million funding switch money, this brings the total available for high needs spend next year to 135.6 million, about 8.6 million higher than in 2023-2024. The Council recognises the financial pressures schools across Staffordshire are facing and will continue to lobby government for additional funding for the sector. Importantly, none of the additional funding received in 2024-2025 will be used to repay historical deficits. For 2024-2025, the special school budgets will be set based on a minimum funding guarantee of 0%, in line with the MFG recommended by government. Also, a further additional payment will be made to special schools and PRUs equivalent to 3.4% of 2023-2024 grant funding, calculated at current place numbers in recognition of their increasing costs. As in previous years, special schools and PRUs will also receive a separate teachers' pay additional grant. The allocations from the DFE are to be confirmed. The report closes with a brief update on other key issues likely to impact on the high needs block in the next year and includes a section on the EBT. As you know, we pulled the EBT earlier in the year. We did continue to monitor the profile of assessments, which, as expected, showed a normal distribution, with the majority of assessments focused around EBT levels 4 to 6, and considerably fewer assessments falling within the highest banding levels of 8 to 10. On average, this is considerably lower than the bandings that were experienced during the initial pilot year and reinforces our concerns regarding implementation. We continue to remain committed to EBT and are considering options for its reintroduction. However, we anticipate that this will not be before April 2025. So apologies for any confusion between the last report and this one. The prior report should have said April 2025. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Do we want to bring that question in, Steve, that we were holding back from the previous item around EBT, or has that been answered by Sarah in terms of April 2025?
Well, yeah, I mean, it has been answered, Richard, and clarified. Thank you very much. The only point I would make is that I'm speaking just for myself as a representative. And I haven't consulted on this, but my feeling is that schools and school leaders would rather they were properly consulted, meaningfully consulted, even if that does mean a delay in implementation, rather than having it rushed just to meet a proposed deadline. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. I've just muttered to Tim on my right. He's going to talk around that the plans for consultation.
So as you can see in the report, when we've ran those pupil needs profiles within in the background of those new EHCPs, you can see the difference there in terms of the distribution. Our plans are to start to re-engage with discussions with schools during the summer term around what that might look like. I have to say that we have to be really honest, again, to say that what we can't afford is to see that drift to the top end of those banding levels. And so a number of options are being drafted, which include, and I'll share it here, but it's about the consultation and the discussion with schools from the summer term, which could include an option where that education banding tool is run by the local authority, and that is the funding that's allocated to that youngster with no discussion with the school. So there's an option there. There is also an option to start to think about, well, actually, if we need to have those discussions, do we change the banding levels and to allow for some of that drift in terms of those higher costs? And that there is even a third option that we're talking about, but there may be other options as well, but are currently being discussed, to say, ultimately, though, if everybody wants an above average fund for an individual youngster, then it may be that we have to go to, well, everybody gets an average for their school, and we look at what that might look like, particularly for special schools. So those are the kind of discussions that are taking place internally. They haven't been formalised yet, but seeing as you've asked the question, Steve, around the meaningful consultation, those will be the types of things that we will start to talk to schools again in the summer term, ready to plan through the autumn, ready for the next financial year. But as I say, nothing confirmed, but lots of discussions that are taking place. But again, I want to clarify what we can't afford is for the same drift that we saw in terms of the previous implementation of it.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Steve, do you want to follow up any of Tim's comments?
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. Thanks,
Okay.
Tim.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, just before I come to you, Richard, yeah, I mean, thanks for that, Tim, but like every other consultation and every other model, the devil will be in the detail. Absolutely. You know, and as long as special schools have got the detail to help the local authority to come to some decision, then that's all we can hope for. Richard?
Yeah, I've got just two questions. One is, it says on page 39 at the bottom of the summary box that SSC will continue to keep schools informed of progress going forward. Do we know how they'll inform schools and how often that will be? Is that just through the forum? Progress towards the banding tool.
Say again, sorry, Richard. Which page
It
were you
says-
referring to?
I'm on page 39. The very last sentence of the executive summary in the top box. It says SCC will continue to keep schools informed of progress going forwards. Can we have some sort of outline as to how that information will be, how we will kept informed and how often?
Yeah, so the intention is when we start to re-engage with schools during the summer term, there'll be some general communication that comes out to all schools, as it did when we'd started that engagement and consultation process the previous time. So that will come out to all schools and academies. It's basically all of our state-funded schools across the county.
Okay, yep, great. Sorry, Richard, just sort of got 2 points. The end of page 45 talks about an anomaly at bands 6, 7 and 8 that requires further investigation, but I'm not clear what the anomaly is. Could someone explain that to me, please?
Yeah,
paragraph 19.
Yeah, so in terms of the anomaly, what we would have expected is to have seen a lowering of the level, so fewer youngsters at 7 than 6. But what we're seeing here in this process is we've actually got more at 7 than 6. So it doesn't actually follow a normal distribution, and so some further investigations being undertaken as to why it seemed to have more at a particular level than the level before. So that's what that's saying. That's why we think there's an anomaly that wouldn't have been in what we were expecting.
So you don't like the shape?
Sorry, Richard, I didn't catch that.
You don't like the shape. It doesn't come out as the statistician that you are.
Yeah,
okay, fine.
Yeah, that we would have expected it to be fewer as you go up the higher the levels, and so we just need to understand what that is, and so some further investigations being undertaken around where those PMPs came out of those levels. We're just doing some further analysis of that.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any other questions from the floor around the high needs block? Okay, I've just got one comment, just to illuminate, I suppose. As Steve quite rightly said, that most of our special schools are over planned places. And I just wanted to flag up to Sarah really that the teachers' grant and the teachers' pension grants for special schools is based on planned places. So therefore, there is some discrepancy around what special schools are getting. So for example, if a special school that is on 125 planned places actually has got 138 planned places, it's £1,700 per child deficit on that grant going into special school budgets. I just thought I would flag that up to the local authority. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item 10, which is the accelerated progress plan. Tim, I think you're picking this up because Hallett's struggling to speak.
Yeah, apologies from Hallett this afternoon. Unfortunately, he's got a bad throat, unable to speak, and so isn't able to join us this afternoon. So I'm just going to run through the report. And I think that the first thing to highlight, and he's just picking up from, I think, Steve, your point previously, that what we recognise is the actions that we're taking are medium to long-term actions. And so in the short term, they're not addressing the particular challenges that we face. But in terms of the work that's taking place, you can see there that an action there around the accelerated progress plan. We're coming to the end of year 2. Our view is that we will have a third accelerated progress plan, but it will be in a reiteration of APP2, building on and then embedding the work that we're already starting. It picks up there around the special schools project in terms of the programmes, and as you can see there, it talked about officers meeting. It was last week. It was 12th. Yeah, it was last week to finalise the projects. And again, those schools in terms of those projects will be informed following that. CDIS, again, some real movement in terms of the expressions of interest came in. Again, all of those interviews took place. And so I know, again, it was the 7th and 14th of March. So again, last week. And so some further information will be shared once those CDIS projects have been confirmed. As I understand it, there has been identification of a project across all of the districts. And as Hallett's indicated there, it will be a rolling start from September 2024. And then there's an update there around the enhanced assess plan do review cycle. And the numbers indicated show that as of the beginning of March, there were circa 90 youngsters who were going through that EAPDR programme. And then, as you can see, the last bullet point in there around the APDR just talked about the working across the districts to hold solution-focused workshops to support their work prior to the EAPDR requests. So that's an update in terms of the work that's taking place. As I say, that medium to long-term work to support us with the challenges that we face.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Questions? Kevin? I was been very surprised you haven't been on before, so you haven't disappointed me.
Well, just waiting for the right time, Richard. Just a quick, well, not a question really, just a sort of a request, I suppose. For a lot of these developments like the EAPDR, we're at quite an early stage of them. We're not quite sure how they're going to work out. We're not quite sure if they're going to have the desired effect. But I would perhaps request for Schools Forum for subsequent meetings that we have some kind of feedback on whether or not we've got evidence to show that it's having the desired effect. So, for example, the number of EHC requests, the number of EHC requests that have come through without EAPDR, the number that are coming through with EAPDR, so that we can get a gauge as a forum as to how effective the EAPDR process is in terms of streamlining the service, because that was the intention of it based on the previous meeting when Hallett presented to us. You know, obviously I'm one of the hub chairs, so I'm sort of like involved in the EAPDR at that kind of grassroots level. And it's too early to say, really. Obviously, it's early days. So I'm just thinking for the future for Schools Forum, having that detailed information might be useful when we're trying to ascertain whether it's been successful or not.
Thanks, Kevin. And it's not only kind of Schools Forum that will be asking for that information. So in terms of internally within the local authority, again, we are tracking all of that information because, again, we want to know and we're keen to make sure that it is making the difference that we wanted it to make, and so that we can start to see the difference it is making. Totally so support that, and the information that you've requested is being tracked. I think from what I heard, all of those points are being tracked and recorded through our Power BI system, so we will be able to kind of provide information on all of those particular aspects. In terms of, again, I think you're saying, yes, it's too early to tell. And as this system embeds in, we've still got youngsters in the system as well, haven't we? And, you know, I just want to kind of reinforce that EAPDR isn't a requirement for a request for an education, health and care plan. However, because that is not a statutory process, but what we want to make sure is that everybody is providing that support early to support the youngsters early, and where necessary then it could avoid the requirement for an education, health and care plan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Tim. Any other questions? No. I've just got one further comment, because apart from being the chair, I'm also the Academy's rep for the Perouse. And again, going back to a previous conversation, and indeed a comment that you made, Tim, at the Education Reference Group, and the difficulties that mainstream schools are having now in terms of the number of children that are being excluded, and the fact that the Perouse are all absolutely full. I have spoken to Tim off the record just to flag up the fact that the outreach workers, which are learning support assistants that are attached to the Perouse and are on the payroll of the Perouse, which was being previously funded by the local authority. Unfortunately, the SEDAS bid from our Perouse, that are in our trust anyway, and I think across the piece, wasn't successful, which means that those learning support assistants that are going into mainstream schools and supporting those really difficult children at the risk of being excluded, their contracts will be terminated in end of July. So Perouse are going to have to start doing that, the HR bits and pieces, to make sure that they tick those boxes. So it seems slightly out of place if we're saying that we have nowhere for our excluded children to go, if we're removing one of the best interventions that we have, which is those learning support assistants, which are skilled up by the Perouse, losing their contracts. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So I've asked the local authority to go and think about that and what other funding streams might be available, but it doesn't make any sense to me at all. Okay, thank you. If we now move on to item 11, I think Helen is on. No, it's me. Yeah, he's on leave, so I was just about to say that, Tim. That Tim is going to step in on behalf of Helen.
Okay, again, apologies that Helen's unable to make the meeting this afternoon. There were a number of questions asked at Schools Forum last time, and so if I kind of, I was going to do it almost the report the wrong way round, in terms of if we went down to the end of the report picks up on those previously asked questions. So again, it talks about the ensuring that the sufficiency of provision going forward, and that reference then picks up in paragraph 7.4 in terms of the market and sufficiency teams are doing some work around the sufficiency, so that we can make sure that we understand where the demand is. And then action plans will be implemented to identify which key needs and opportunities, and again, regular meetings to address those sufficiency aspects, and there again also just picking up on that bespoke support offered to providers to support the sustainability expansion or consideration of a different range of delivery models. Again, if you then go on to the issue around capital funding and how will it be allocated, again, that was picked up under the item 8.6, and just that reference to the process for the allocation of the capital funding. It will be shared with providers when it becomes available in line with the DFE timescales. And again, just saying that a more detailed report can be provided on this. And so I suggest that because we've got the forum meeting in July, that we bring that back to July's forum meeting, because we should have that information then. Again, in terms of the other questions, you can see there that around the risk providers going forward. And I think, Philip, you've already referenced up to 80% of the business and some of the challenges around state funded. And again, there's a response there in terms of the information is detailed in the newly published statutory guidance and the process that we have to follow. And then finally, that previous report had a mix of terms which referenced the funded or free or and free. And one of the things I think we have to recognise is that it is funded places rather than free places, although our kind of early years team are saying that where we're quoting directly from central government, then we will be using the term that central government use. I don't know whether there's any questions. I can see, Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add just a little teeny weeny bit on that. And you are right about the term funded and free. We've tried always to use the term funded, but I did see something yesterday that had come out of from central government that refers to free, and obviously there's clearly not a lot we can do about that, but I have always pushed the line that we talk about funded, because somewhere at the end of the day someone is paying for this. Yeah, I think I think the providers will concur that our team, our early years team, sufficiency team, work really hard on trying to work this, and I think we do a particularly good job in Staffordshire, and I get briefings on a regular basis from the team, and I think, as Tim has already explained, the next steps going forward, there's no real point in me repeating what he's said.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Sorry, I think Philip hand is up.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So we acknowledge that the point has been addressed, but we note that the new statutory guidance doesn't cope with the problem that's going to arrive in the next 2 years, and that's the point that we want to perhaps bring up in the early years reference group to try and address this properly. There are issues around the sufficiency audits, which they are very good, but the problem is that they don't look at the full-time equivalents, which we really need to get to grips with, because if decisions are being made as to on the withdrawal of funding, we don't necessarily know at any one time, and certainly as this new entitlement begins to pick up speed, we don't know what the situation is on a month-to-month basis. And the other thing that we need to address is that where there has been a really questionable Ofsted outcome, the parents themselves often do not want to have their children have to go to another provider, and the And the big point that comes up is proximity. The biggest decider of where a parent would put their child into a nursery is proximity. It's by far and away the biggest. So we want these. We would like to see these. I feel a bit guilty really bringing this up because we know that SEC do a really good job here, but we do think these issues need proper consideration. And we as I say, if we get to the point where 80% is 80% of what we do is funded, it's a crucial thing, and there will be. It's just waiting to happen. There will be significant providers. Well, all providers are significant, but there will be a big loss of provision here and a big adverse result on sufficiency. That was all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. Tim, do you want to just come in on that, please?
I think what we have to commit to, Philip, is that, you know, where we can, we will work with you. So in terms of that reference group, absolutely we'll look to have those conversations and work and support the providers. We know, and hopefully, and I think you've reflected it on numerous occasions now in terms of it's not SCC, it's more broader than that. But one of the things I think we will commit to is to continue to work with you, because we've got to work together to resolve the particular issue. So absolutely, yeah, we will continue to do that.
Thank you, Philip. Kevin?
Yeah, just a quick request, really. Obviously, Philip put forward like the PVI issue and the issue for PVI settings, which is quite right, because that's his role here. I don't have a nursery in my school, so I don't know the kind of challenges that this is bringing to schools, and we don't hear about that. That's not Philip's fault, because Philip's putting his PVI stuff forward, which is quite right. But I'm just wondering if there are any schools in, or if Tim or someone can give us a flavour of the challenges that this is posing to schools and how it affects them in terms of their budgets and in terms of their cash flow or management or staffing or whatever. So I don't know if anyone can answer that, but I'd be quite interested to know.
I don't have the detail other than to say that, again, as part of the work that the early years team do, that they are engaging with our kind of that state funded, governor run nursery provision across the county as well.
Okay. Are there none in the room?
Philip?
Oh. I'm sorry. Yeah, I have got a comment on that, and the thing actually, I should really. Well, I was going to say, I noticed that we have a head teacher who wants to comment on it, and maybe she should go first. But my comment is that it is different. It's very different for PVIs because we only get one hit at it, and if when we're 80% of what we do is dependent on funding, then we could be wiped out overnight. That's the thing, and it isn't a level playing field with schools. And I've got nothing against schools having nurseries. In fact, we operate a nursery for a school in Lichfield. But the thing is, when a school gets inspected, their nursery is inspected as a sort of an add-on, whereas our nurseries, particularly big nurseries, will get two inspectors who spend a whole day at on site, and it's a very different. It is not a level playing field, and I think this is one of the injustices that we want to see rectified. Sorry,
so that's kind of why I asked the question.
Well, I thank you for your intervention.
Okay, thank you for it. It just seemed grossly unfair. Vicky?
Well, I've got a governor-run nursery at my school. And so, yeah, I don't think it's as much of a risk for us as it would be for a PVI for the reasons that Philip has just brought up, because obviously they're inspecting our schools. The rest of the school is funded for us. So we're not getting our only funding from the nursery. And, you know, there's not as much risk that that would be removed. Yeah, I don't know how PVIs cope with some of the stuff that comes along, because it is easier to field when you're attached to a school. So that would be my observation.
I was actually interested, Vicky, from the point of view of increasing to the 30 hours offer, and the challenge that actually poses a school who, I don't know, maybe has less flexibility in terms of its employment options, perhaps. I don't know. I just wondered, because I don't have the luxury, so I don't know.
No, I think it has various implications across those kind of things in terms of hours, but I think with the 30-hour funding, you know, if you've got a child that's doing the full 30 hours, you know you've got that amount of funding, and you know what your minimum number of hours is to afford your staff. And, you know, we can sometimes prop up the nursery from the main school budget, or sometimes we've been able to use some money from nursery for the rest of the school because we don't charge them for heating or lighting, or, you know, on a monthly basis or whatever. So I think you've got more options.
Okay, Vicky, I'm sorry to be rude. I'm going to just pop in here now, because I think this is a conversation it could go on for, you know, for eternity. I think one idea possibly, Philip, is that quite clearly you've got SCC's support and backing. Is it worth that we make a representation through Forum? We put a letter together to whoever it needs to go to. Every little helps, and certainly I'm prepared to sit with you and we could form a letter and write it, seek Tim's advice and see who are the best people to place it with. I'm not saying that's going to have any effect, but it's not for the want of trying. So the offer, Philip, if you want to, I can phone you and we can sort it out and get something scripted.
Yeah, I'd be very grateful for that. Thank you, okay. Richard. Yes, it would be very helpful.
Okay.
I mean, we're obviously bringing it up with them, but I thought it was important enough to bring it up on Schools Forum, because it's a real issue that is going to, certainly over the next 2 years, is going to be very difficult.
No, and quite rightly so, Philip. You're obviously very passionate around what you do, and like we're saying, if we can put a letter in, let's hope it has a little bit of effect, but it's not for the want of trying, so no problem. Okay, any other? Sorry, Steve, I've missed your hand there.
No, I was going to go back to something different, so I was going to ask the others to carry on anyway. Yeah, can I just go back briefly to the issue of funded is against free, because we appreciate the difference, but the average parent, I'm pretty sure, the average parent who picks up from the media funded places does not appreciate the difference between funded and free. I'm just wondering whether the local authority does, and if not, if the local authority could do something to actually publicise the fact that funded does not necessarily mean free.
Yeah, I'll take that back, Steve, to our early years team to encourage them to ensure that we kind of clarify what the difference is, because actually most of the services that you all provide and the local authority provide may be free at the point of receipt, but actually they're not free because they cost something, don't they? And that's the point around all of this, that it isn't free. There is a cost to it, and so actually that's the point around kind of being funded. But yeah, we can look to make sure that we continue to ensure that everybody understands the point, and to some extent some of the cost of that funded places as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Philip?
Yeah, just quickly on that, I have to say that our early years department is really good at explaining that on the family information service is really good at explaining that to people. But the point there is that they have already come to a provider with the idea that it is going to be free, and they have to be disabused of that. But we get tremendous support from the early years team in doing that. So I just want that to be, minuted, that we are very well supported. But it's sort of after the event. So I agree that some kind of more publicity. I mean, the biggest thing that helped us was that the SCC insists that we inform parents what the value of a funded place is, or a free place as the government would have it. So we put in our terms and conditions, in our offer letter, we say that we are required to tell you what the value of a free place, of a funded place is, by Staffordshire County Council, and it is, and we put in the funding amount, so our parents can quickly understand that it nowhere near covers the cost. So I do, as always, I would, back up the SCC. They do a marvellous job. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Any other questions to Tim around that particular item? Okay, so we can move on to item 12, which is the work programme and dates of the next meeting. Could I just make a request for the accelerated progress plan for the next meeting, if it could be made clear around the different funding streams that are funding that initiative. So quite clearly there's the SEDIS, there's the LMG, and there's the commissioning framework. But if that could be made clear in the report at the next meeting, that would be really appreciated. And also maybe a comment around the Send Capital grant and how that's helping those funding streams. Thank you. Yeah, Tim, can you see on that? Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Two things. Does the election of chair need to go on the summer term meeting? And on the autumn term meeting, the work programme says 17th of October and the agenda item says 14th of November. So, sorry, I've just seen it says for the 7th of October. I've just looked at my agenda properly. So it is the 14th of November, not the 7th or the 17th. Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Simon, do you want to just comment on that, please?
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Steve. I was going to raise it myself. I was asked after the last meeting that we amend that because of the usual consultation process that will take place at the beginning of the school term with regards to the funding switch. What tends to be the case is I will put the date in for October and then I'll be asked for it to be moved back to November. That happened in between getting this agenda sorted and getting it sent out. So thank you for highlighting that for me, though.
Yeah, it was actually 17th, not 7th. There's a typo there, I think.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Vicky?
Thanks.
Sorry, Vicky, is yours a legacy hand or is it a new hand?
No, I was just going to support your request for the summer term meeting around an update on the accelerated progress plan and how this is being funded, knowing some of that already from the ISPB meeting that I attended on Monday.
I don't know whether that's great minds think alike, Vicky, or fools never differ. Tim?
I just wanted to explain the item that we've put onto the works programme around the SIMS contract. So I think those who are aware of who have been members of Forum for a period of time now, that the contract for the SIMS is approaching its final breakpoint in March 25. And so we've got the opportunity to consider the options with regard to either committing to the next 5 years on the existing SIMS contract or consider school management information systems from alternative providers. And so what we're currently doing is Staffordshire ICT is undertaking some research into the contract for the SIMS and again alternatives available on the market, and so that we hopefully will have an options paper for consideration by Schools Forum at the meeting in July. And the reason why we're putting it onto the meeting in July is because, don't forget, any decisions will then be taken in the meeting in November. So we're trying to bring it forward so everybody's got all of the relevant information, opportunities to then go and have discussions with colleagues, and for us to do a wider consultation with Maintain Schools. Don't forget, again, this is a contract for the local local authority Maintain Schools in terms of the management system. So that's why it's on the work programme for July, because we will need to make the decision in the at the November meeting.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Any other questions around the works programme? Okay, so just before we finish, just to confirm that the next meeting is on Thursday, the 11th of July, and that will be virtual via Teams. And the meeting after that, it will be Thursday, the 14th of November, and that will be in person. So, going back to where we started from this afternoon, thank you very much, everybody, for attending Schools Forum, and wish you a very happy Easter. Thank you.
And you.